Welcome to our PixScan class. I'm Kelly Wayment for Silhouette, and I'm here to show you all the great things you can do with PixScan mat. PixScan technology allows you to cut precisely around printed images on your mat or position cut lines in specific locations on your material. Any material placed on the PixScan mat can be imported into Silhouette Studio by scanner or by camera, and then cut lines are assigned. The PixScan mat has its own registration marks that use the Silhouette's optical scanner to find the right place to cut. You do need the correct size of mat for your Silhouette machine. So there's a Cameo PixScan mat, one for portrait, and 2 Curio PixScan mats for the different sizes of base. So what can PixScan do? It has a variety of uses to add to the toolbox of each Silhouette machine. It can cut from scraps of paper with an exact placement of cut designs on those scraps. It can also cut out images already printed, such as pattern paper, photos, or commercial cards. It can cut out stamped images or digitize your collection of stamped images into cut files. It can cut around original artwork or digitize hand-lettered or hand-drawn items. It can also extend the Silhouette's print and cut capabilities. And you can use PixScan to sketch on pre-printed tags and shapes. There are 4 basic steps you'll use with PixScan. First, you'll place your material onto your PixScan mat. Second, you'll import an image of that PixScan mat into Silhouette Studio, and you can do that with a scanner or a digital camera. Third, you'll assign cut lines, and you can do that by tracing, using drawing tools, or adding library shapes. And finally, you'll load the PixScan mat with the material still on it into your Silhouette machine and send it to cut. Let's go over a very basic way to use the PixScan mat first. I have a scrap of paper here, and I want to use what's left of it to create a calendar page title. Now, if I had a rectangular piece, it would be pretty easy to do that in Silhouette Studio. But this one has an odd shape. If I put it on my PixScan mat, I can place my cut design exactly where I want on that scrap and then cut it with my Silhouette machine. We'll need to import a picture of this mat with all its registration marks into the software. And you have 2 options for importing into Silhouette Studio. You can use a digital camera or a scanner. And I'm going to show you how to use a camera first. First, we'll take off the protective cover off the PixScan mat, and then we'll place the scrap of paper onto the PixScan mat. And it just needs to be within these borders. Make sure it's completely inside that cut border. Next, in the software, we'll open the PixScan panel. And you have 2 options, one for the camera and one for the scanner, and we are going to stay on the camera right now. So we need to take a picture of this PixScan mat with the material on it. So in a well-lit area, we're going to take a picture of the mat. The mat needs to lay flat. You don't want to zoom in with the camera. You want to leave a border around the outside of the mat so the entire mat is showing in the frame. And when you are taking a picture with a camera, you do not actually have to have it perfectly level. You just need to have all of the mat in the picture. Those special registration marks on the mat will correct for any skewed angles. Then we'll import and save the photo into the computer. So you'll need to connect either by cable, email it to yourself, or use some kind of cloud sharing so you can get that picture onto your computer. So let's go into the software, and I'm going to plug in my phone. In Silhouette Studio, I'm on the camera icon, and I'll click Import PixScan Image from File. And I am going to leave that on the auto setting in the PixScan panel. So I'm going to find where I saved that picture. and just double click to open it. And you can see it's loading the image. We want to give it time to completely import. Once you see the full virtual PixScan mat on your screen, we're ready to go. You can see that this PixScan mat on my virtual screen looks exactly the way it looks when I took the picture of it. So you don't want to move the material on your mat once you've taken a picture of it, and you actually can't move anything on your screen just so you can't move it out of position. And don't worry if the colors seem dark or ugly, because we're not printing anything, we're just getting that image there. So I want to add letters for a calendar page title. So I'm going to copy these from this other document that I have ready, and I'm going to paste them into this screen. And so now I can rearrange and rotate these letters so they fit on my material on my PixScan mat. And that's kind of a tight fit, which is one of the great advantages of a PixScan mat. You can really get those in there tight. And I'm actually going to change the line color to white and increase the thickness a little bit so I can see that better. So wherever I place that on my virtual mat is where it will cut on my real mat. We'll go ahead and go to the Send panel. And I'll choose the settings for my material. So my material, this is a pattern paper. And I want my action to be cut and my tool to be auto blade. And if you were using a machine that used a ratchet blade, you could choose a ratchet blade. And you should note that if you're going to do a test cut, I usually do that for the material on a regular cutting mat and just save my PixScan mat for the cutting once I know what my material settings should be. I am ready to insert the PixScan mat into my Silhouette machine, and I will send it to cut as soon as that is loaded. I will get my blade into my machine, and with my material still in the same place, I'm going to load it. And then I can send it in the software. I'll unload this, and you will see that these letters have cut from this little scrap, this odd shaped scrap, exactly where I put them in my software. So that is ready for me just to apply to my layout, and I'll just glue that on. You don't actually need to save that document, your PixScan document, in the software. PixScan is kind of a one-time use. So once you've taken a picture of your mat and put it in your software and done your cut, those cuts won't do you any good to save it. Each time you put it on your mat, put your material on your mat, you will just use it that one time. If you change the position of anything on your mat, you would need to do a new import with a camera or scanner. I used letters for this example, but you can also use drawing tools or use library designs on your material to get that same really tight fit. Let's talk briefly about calibrating your camera. Many current cameras and smartphones are already in the software. I showed you that you could choose auto in that PixScan panel, and that's a good place to start when importing your photos. But if your camera is not recognized or your cuts are consistently skewed, that's when you would want to perform a calibration. So let's look at that in the software. So I'll open my PixScan panel, and on this same camera tab, you can click an option to show calibration test card. When you click that, it will open a new document that's just filled with dots. You're going to print this page, and then you're going to take a picture with your camera. So let me show you that. To print this calibration test page, I'm just going to send it to my printer with the print icon. Choose your printer. Okay, so we've got this calibration test card that's come off the printer, and we'll just take a picture of this again. So this time, you want to make sure that you're not placing your printout on your PixScan mat. We're leaving that out for a minute. We're going to use this in a well-lit area without shadows, and we want to fill the entire frame with the dots. This time we don't want the border left on the outside, and we want it to be as even as possible. So we're going to go back into the software and retrieve that image from the camera. So to retrieve that image, we're going to click on the PixScan panel down here, the little plus icon. We're going to go find where that photo is saved. Go ahead and double click to open. And now the software is going to save that camera into our list, so we can always select this camera when using the camera tab for importing our PixScan images. And you don't have to do that for every camera, as I mentioned. A lot of them are in there automatically. Once you do calibrate your camera, you only have to do that once with your camera. That will stay on your list. So far we've talked about using a camera to import images, and we've talked about using library designs, shapes, and text to place cut lines on imported PixScan images. Another great use for PixScan is cutting exactly around pre-printed or stamped objects. In these cases, you usually don't have a cut line already available to fit the design. To create cut lines for pre-printed images, you use the Trace feature in Silhouette Studio. For this example, let's cut out a design from pattern paper. I want to cut around some of these designs on my pattern paper to add to the calendar page I started earlier. So I'll put it on my PixScan mat, and then I'm going to import by scanner into the software. And I could use a camera again, but I just want to show you how to do it with a scanner. I've already trimmed down this paper so it fits within the cut borders of the PixScan mat, and let me show you how to do it on a scanner. So this is a flatbed scanner, and as you can see, it's not going to fit the whole mat all at once. And so I'm going to do this in 2 passes, and it will stitch it together in Silhouette Studio. The same thing would happen if you were using a portrait PixScan mat. You would do it in 2 passes because the entire mat doesn't fit at one time. So we'll lay this on the scanner bed. And each scanner model will be just a little bit different, but it's basically the same for all of them. So I'll put it on my mat, and then we'll go into the software. So I've got the mat on the scanner. I'm going to open the PixScan panel. And this time I'll select the Scanner tab. Then I need to choose a source, and that is just my scanner. This one's a Canon. So once I have that all ready, I'm going to click Import PixScan Image from Scanner. And a dialog box will pop open, and again, this will be different for each scanner or printer manufacturer. You want to choose the largest scan area possible if it lets you. Otherwise, just click Scan, and that's going to scan it and load it into Silhouette Studio. Okay, so only half of the image is here. So I'm going to rotate my mat on the scanner and scan it again. So you'll just rotate it 180 degrees and put it in exactly the same spot you had before. And for this one, it's in the upper left corner is where I'm lining it up. In the software, we'll open the PixScan panel, open the Scanner tab, choose the scanner again, and choose Import PixScan Image from Scanner, and click Scan again. So you can see that that took the 2 sides of the mat, and it used those registration marks to put this on our screen as one complete image. The image is ready, but the machine doesn't know where to cut until we've put cut lines. And so to do that, we're going to trace. So we'll open the Trace panel. It looks like a butterfly here. And click Select Trace Area. I'm going to drag a box around the area I want to trace, which is this little explore icon. And the area you want to trace is going to fill with yellow. So I'm going to increase my threshold to get a nice clean edge. Let me zoom this in. I'm just looking for a clean edge on the outside of this icon. And that looks pretty good to me. And so I am going to click Trace Outer Edge because I only want the outline of the shape and not everything separated by yellow. I'm going to drag this to the side so we can see it better. And you can see that this trace has picked up a little bit of extra detail that I don't want. These are cut lines, and I only want the cut line around this explore icon. So to do that after trace, you just release the compound path. So you can do that in the Modify panel, or you can right-click and choose Release Compound Path. And that will separate those pieces. I don't need those anymore, so I'll delete them. Now I could take this cut line and put it exactly over this shape on my page and cut exactly, but I'm going to take it one step further and create a small border or an offset. So I'll open my offset panel and I'll click offset, and I want 0.05. When I've got that, I'll click Apply, and now I can take just the offset and place it over the image on my PixScan mat area so I can cut that extra border on the outside. I'm going to do this one more time to trace this little sign. Trace panel, select trace area, increase my threshold, and trace outer edge. And then I'll do the same thing to clean it up and apply an offset. Right-click and choose Release Compound Path. I'll open my offset panel and I'll click Offset, and I want 0.05. When I've got that, click Apply, and now I can take just the offset and place it over the image on my PixScan mat area so I can cut that extra border on the outside. Now remember, whenever you're using PixScan and you're trying to put cut lines, you don't have to use any one particular method. So I traced those. This time I'm just going to put a circle around these little trees here, just with my circle drawing tool. Those have cut lines now, and my machine is going to know where to cut. So I'll go to the Send panel and set it up for cutting my material. This is a thin pattern paper, so I've set my own custom settings. So my blade will be on 2, my speed 5, and my force 13. I've got my action is cut, and my tool is auto blade. So I'm ready to load my mat and send it to cut. So I'll just take it off the scanner, make sure I don't move anything on the PixScan mat, load it, and send. So I'll unload that, and now I have these shapes that have their nice little borders around them. And I can add these to my calendar page I started earlier. So I can just take these and add them to my page with a little bit of adhesive. And that is a great way to use pre-printed shapes that are already on a printed paper to use them on your projects. So you can use this same process of placing designs on your PixScan mat and cutting them out from pre-printed designs. And you can do that with fabric, or take the parts you like out of a commercial card or any other cuttable material. So let's look at this pineapple real quick. I used fabric interfacing. This is the clean cut fusible fabric interfacing on this pineapple fabric. I stuck that to my PixScan mat, and then I traced it in Silhouette Studio after I imported it with the scanner. And you can see some of these trace designs and the cleanup I did on the side. I came up with my final cut line, and then I put this on the PixScan mat through my cutter, and I was able to cut out the pineapple from the fabric. And so now I've got a card base. Since this is the clean cut fabric interfacing, I could just iron it straight onto this card and have a nice soft fuzzy feel from this fleece fabric. I did something similar to take a commercial card, and I had a card like this. I had to cut it down so it would fit on my PixScan mat. And then in the software, you can see I've got my trace lines out here on the side, and then my final offsets that I used, and I just stuck that card on my PixScan mat into my Silhouette machine, and I was able to take out just the parts I wanted from this card so I could get these cute little shapes, and that way I don't have to use someone else's card. I can just use the best parts of it for my own card. And then if I wanted to go in later and save this, I could actually add it to my PixScan mat again and import again, trace however I needed, and I could retrieve other parts of this design if I wanted to. Let me give you some troubleshooting tips you might encounter when using your PixScan mat, particularly when you're using a scanner. You might get an error message about it not reading the markings. So the things you want to check for that are to make sure that your material is completely inside the border of your cut mat, and make sure there's no stray dots outside of the cut border, any marks or anything. You also want to make sure that you have your correct machine selected before you try and import an image. You may need to reposition your mat on your scanner. So sometimes, usually I'll start up in the left corner, but sometimes if I'm getting a message about it not reading the markings, I will shift it down a little bit. And from time to time, I will scan the second side first before the first side, and that might help it work better. Another thing you can do is in the software, when your scanner dialog pops up, make sure that you have the widest area available selected so it can capture as much of that screen as possible. And then if you still can't get it to work, sometimes you might just need to take the items off your mat or reposition them, and then it works. Also, if you get a message from your scanner that it has poor visibility, the thing to check for that is to make sure that your printer or scanner drivers are updated or installed. And if the PixScan panel itself doesn't open or doesn't register, you can restart your software, restart your printer, or maybe restart your computer completely. And if those don't help you and you still need troubleshooting hints, SilhouetteAmerica.com does have an FAQ section for the PixScan panel, and you can find more suggestions there. Let's talk about another great use for the PixScan mat. So far, we've talked about cutting from paper scraps, cutting from pattern paper, and other printed materials. But what if you want to cut out around your stamped images? PixScan is great for that too. This is a stamp I've created with my Silhouette Mint machine, but you can use this same process for any of your stamps in your collection. I'm going to stamp this a few times on my paper, and I don't have to be extremely precise on where I put this. I'll then take this and put it on my PixScan mat, and I can import it by camera or scanner. Let's go into the software and I'll show you that scanning process again. Open the PixScan panel, open the Scanner tab and find the scanner, and import. Once that's loaded on the screen with my virtual PixScan mat, I just need to trace to assign cut lines. So I'll open my trace panel. I'm going to zoom in, and you'll notice I used a dark ink color. That's going to help me with the trace to get nice crisp lines. So I'll select my trace area, drag a selection box, and increase my threshold so I can get that shape to fill with yellow. Adjusting the scale down here is optional. And I could decide to trace or trace outer edge when I'm using a PixScan image. So if I use a trace option, that's going to leave these blank areas that aren't filled with yellow. That's going to leave holes in my design. If I choose trace outer edge, that's going to ignore the inner holes and just trace the outer edge. The choice that you want to make just depends on your particular design and the detail you're trying to capture. For this one, I'm going to choose trace. So I could clean this up with point editing if I needed to by double clicking. I actually got one spot in there I just want to delete, and click away to exit point editing. I actually want to create an offset around this again. So I'm going to open my offset panel, select my design, click offset, and I'm going to go with a 0.030 distance. And that looks good. I'll click apply. You could go with a larger or smaller offset, just depending on the look that you want. A larger offset helps sometimes with any slight imperfections you might get in your PixScan cut lines, making those lines a little less noticeable. Or you could create an internal offset that would cut slightly into the design. So I've got my offset, and one of the nice things when you're using identical stamped images is you can copy the one that you've done. Just going to do Control-C, Control or Command-C, and then Control or Command-V to paste a copy. And I can actually use just a copy of that first trace for all of these dragonflies on the page. You might need to rotate it a little bit depending on how your stamped image went on. And I'll just use my arrow keys to nudge that into position. And again, I could use drawing shapes if I wanted to, or frames or something from my library. That looks good, so I'll go to my Send panel. This time I'm going to choose a plain cardstock for my material, because that's what I've stamped on. And I'll just tweak the settings a little bit. And that's set to cut, and I've got my auto blade selected, so I can load my PixScan mat and send it. Okay, I'll unload that. And I've got these perfect dragonflies that I can add to a card, and I didn't have to spend my time cutting those out with scissors. So I'm just going to put a little bit of foam adhesive on these and add it to my card. So that's a fun way to use a stamped image with your PixScan mat to apply to an actual card. Let me go into the software again. I want to show you something else you can do with that traced image. Back in the design page, you remember I traced this original stamped image, and I can actually save the outlines and the trace, whatever I want, save it for future use. So I'm going to copy these and open a new document and paste it. I'm going to do this so the background from my PixScan mat isn't saved. And now I can take this design and go Save As, Save to Library, and give it a name, Dragonfly Stamp. Click OK. And now I can find that same outline and trace in my user design section of my library. So anytime I stamp that image, I'm able to go and use the cut lines I've already created this one time, and so I don't have to trace it every single time. You could also use this full traced image, not just the outline, and you could recolor it or print and cut or cut it from some other material without even stamping. And I'm going to show you that process in a little bit different context with hand lettering. Now I want to talk about digitizing artwork or hand lettering. I have a page here that has my original lettering on it, drawn with markers, and I want to digitize it to save it as my own cut file. So I'm going to put it on my PixScan mat and import it with the scanner, and then I'll show you what you can do with it in the software. The PixScan panel, I'll open my Scan tab and choose that scanner and import it. So that is showing my virtual PixScan mat, and I don't need to do a second pass because it all fits with just a single pass. I want to trace these. So I'll open my trace panel, select my trace area, and I'll just do these one at a time. I'll drag my selection box around the word create, and I'm going to increase the threshold until that fills with yellow, and I think about 71% looks good. Decrease my scale a little bit, and I will click Trace. I'll do the same thing with the Inspire word art. Select my trace area, increase the threshold. Again, I'll decrease the scale a little bit, and again, click Trace. Now at this point, I could cut these out from this paper that's on my PixScan mat, but in this instance, I just want them as cut files that I can have for myself to cut from any material I want. So I'm going to drag the cut lines away. I'm going to copy each of them to their own page. And now I can rotate them, clean them up if I need to. I can resize them, fill them with color. So these could be printed if I wanted to. But once I have them the way I want, I can do the same thing to save them to my library as I did last time. So I would just go File, Save As, Save to Library, and name it. And then I've got this design in my library, in my user designs, that I can cut however I want. Let me show you what I've done with these cut files that I created with my PixScan mat. I just turned them into vinyl cutouts, I can cut them out of vinyl or whatever material I want, any size that I want, and you can see they're much larger than their original size. I have all of those options once my cut lines are created. And you could do something similar just by scanning in your lettering, but PixScan ensures that it opens at its true size, and if you're using a camera import, those registration marks compensate for any of those skewed angles you might have. So keep in mind that although we just digitized this lettering and can digitize stamps in the same way, PixScan is also a great option for digitizing or cutting out around your artwork. As you can see by now, PixScan is not the same thing as print and cut. With PixScan, your designs are already printed, and it uses the registration marks on the mat to determine where to cut. With a print and cut, you're printing documents directly from Silhouette Studio, and the registration marks are on the printed page itself to tell the machine where to cut. In general, you'll get a little more precision with a print and cut issued directly from the software, but with PixScan, it'll add to the flexibility of your print and cuts from Silhouette Studio. On this page, I've got 4 labels that are a print and cut. You can see the registration marks are on the page itself, but a print and cut requires a border of unusable space. Let me show you that in the software. So I have this page open in the software, and you can see that the cut lines, the border of the cut lines are here, and you've got your crosshatch areas. All of this space is unusable for cutting in that area. On this next page, these are the same labels, but because I don't have to use that print and cut registration mark area, I can actually fit 6 of these same labels on this page. I just put it on my PixScan mat, and I use rectangles to create those cut lines, and I can fit more on a page. From time to time, you may also create a print and cut that for whatever reason fails to read this registration marks and you can't get it to cut. PixScan can actually help you rescue that page. So in the software, this same page, I just placed it on my PixScan mat, and I can assign cut lines here. And in lots of cases, you can use that same cut line you had for your original print and cut, and you can use that to create your cut lines. So I would just place this and make copies of it all across my document, and then I could send this as a PixScan document and still get all of those cut out, and I haven't wasted that paper or that ink. PixScan is great for placing cut lines around documents you create and print from other programs too. So I created this page of text full of labels to go on a book report for one of my kids, and I created it in a different program. It's got a lot of text. I spent all the time in another program. I didn't want to transfer it all into Silhouette Studio and get that all changed. So what I can do with this is print it from that other program and place it on my PixScan mat. And let me show you what it looks like in the software. So I brought it into Silhouette Studio through importing on my PixScan mat. And now I can just either trace or draw those cut lines for all of those text boxes and send it to cut here. So that really helps you use your Silhouette machine no matter what program you're using. You can see how the PixScan mat really extends your print and cut capabilities. You can use existing tags, labels, and scrapbook paper to add sketch text with the help of a PixScan mat. I'm going to put these on my PixScan mat and import them with my scanner into Silhouette Studio. I've got the mat on the scanner. I'm going to open the PixScan panel, select the Scanner tab. Then I need to choose a source, click Import PixScan Image from Scanner. Click Scan, and that's going to scan it and load it into Silhouette Studio. Okay, so now I have these labels and things on my virtual PixScan mat, and I want to add some sketched text so I can use a sketch pen and write directly on these things without using my own handwriting. I'll use my text tool and create some text for these. So I'll create my text, and then in the text style panel, I'll adjust that to the size I want and the text, the fonts I want. Adjust my line spacing. And by adjusting all those settings, I can get my text exactly where I want, even on something with lines on it. These are sketch fonts, so they look really nice with a sketch pen. So I'm not drawing outlines, I'm just drawing a single line. Those are mostly ready to sketch, but I do need a cut line so I can cut out this word bubble. And again, I would do that with a trace, but I've done that earlier, so I'm going to copy and paste this shape in here. So I want to turn my sketch lines that I want to draw with the sketch pen, I want to turn those to a blue line color. So I'm going to hold my Shift key while I select those, and in the Quick Access toolbar I'm going to choose a line color that's blue, and I will leave this line that I want to cut out red. Go to the Send panel, and because I've set this up the way I have, I can use the Line Color Action tab. I want the blue lines to sketch and the red lines to cut. I'm going to make sure that the blue square is up at the top. I can drag that wherever I want. I want it at the top so it does the action first. I want to set my material to pattern paper. I'm going to change my action to sketch, and that automatically changes my tool to a sketch pen. Then my red square is for my red line color. And again, I want the material to be pattern paper medium. And this time I do want it to cut and use my auto blade. If you're cutting with a single tool holder, what you would do is add a pause between these lines. So I would right click and just choose Add a Pause, and that will pause the machine so you can take that opportunity to take your sketch pen out and replace it with the blade and then resume cutting. But since we have the Cameo 3, we don't need that pause in there. It'll just do one after the other. The last thing I need to do is set my blue line color for the sketching to my blue tool holder, the one on the right, and then I will leave my auto blade in the red or left tool holder, and then I can actually put my sketch pen in the blue tool holder and my auto blade in the red tool holder, and then load my mat and cut. The blade goes in the left tool holder indicated by red, and my sketch pen goes in the right tool holder indicated by blue, and that matches what you see in the Send panel. Once those are in place, I can load my PixScan mat and send it to cut in the software. So you can see that's a great way to use your PixScan mat and your sketch pens, so you can use items that are already printed or designs that are already cut out and really get the precision you need, and you don't have to use your own handwriting. There's a lot of fun uses for that. That's the end of our PixScan class, and I hope you've learned a variety of ways you can use your PixScan mat. I think you'll find more ways to use it in addition to what we've covered here. For troubleshooting help, reach out to support@silhouetteamerica.com. And don't forget to visit our Silhouette YouTube channel for more help with the Silhouette Studio software. Thanks for joining me. I hope your PixScan mat becomes an enjoyable part of your Silhouette toolbox.